The sound of bone cracking should never echo through a gymnasium, especially not during what was supposed to be a simple volleyball game. But sometimes the most devastating moments become the catalyst for the most extraordinary transformations. Maya Chen learned this truth the hard way, lying on cold blue mats with her arm twisted at an impossible angle, while three girls stood over her laughing. What they didn't know was that they had just awakened something that had been sleeping for far too long. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The community center had never seen anything like it. 300 people packed into folding chairs, their conversations dying to whispers as Maya Chen walked onto the polished wooden floor. Her left arm hung in a sling, but her right hand moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years perfecting every gesture, every strike, every defensive block. The cast on her forearm bore signatures from classmates who had once pretended she didn't exist and now watched her with something approaching reverence. Principal Martinez stood at the microphone, adjusting his tie nervously. He had tried to cancel this demonstration 3 times, worried about liability, about controversy, about the questions from the school board that would surely follow. But Maya had insisted. And after everything that had happened, after the videos that had gone viral, and the reporters who had called, denying her this moment would have been impossible. Madison Pierce sat in the 3rd row, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back severely, her face pale beneath carefully applied makeup. The confidence that had once made her untouchable had cracked like ice under pressure. Next to her, Chloe Williams stared at her hands, while Brianna Torres had chosen not to come at all. Tyler Brooks was notably absent, though everyone knew he was facing more serious consequences than a mere suspension. Maya's mother, Lisa, gripped the edge of her seat so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She had driven here from the medical center, still wearing her scrubs, having left work early for the first time in months. Rachel sat beside her, holding Alex's hand to keep him from bouncing with excitement. The family had lived through weeks of police reports, hospital visits, and late-night conversations about justice and healing. Now they watched as Maya prepared to show the world who she really was. The demonstration mat stretched 12 feet in each direction, surrounded by onlookers who had come expecting a show but were about to witness something deeper. Maya bowed to her imaginary opponent, a tradition her grandfather had taught her when she was 7 years old, training in the small dojo above his restaurant in San Francisco. The motion was reverent, precise, a ritual that connected her to thousands of years of tradition and discipline. Ethan Davis leaned forward from his seat near the basketball hoop. He had driven here with his teammates, ostensibly to support a classmate, but really because he couldn't stop thinking about the girl he had dismissed so easily just months before. The soccer star who had everything was beginning to understand that he had noticed nothing at all. Maya closed her eyes and began to move. Her right hand cut through the air in a perfect knife-hand strike, followed by a spinning kick that would have dropped an opponent twice her size. Each technique flowed into the next, like water finding its path down a mountainside. The broken arm didn't slow her down. It seemed to focus her energy, channeling years of suppressed power into her remaining limbs. The crowd fell completely silent. Even Alex stopped fidgeting. This wasn't the performance of someone showing off or seeking attention. This was the emergence of someone who had been hiding in plain sight, someone whose strength had been invisible until the moment it was desperately needed. Jordan Kim sat near the back, sketching frantically in a Wetton notebook, trying to capture the grace and power of Maya's movements. As the newest member of what would soon become the Pine Valley Self-Defense Club, Jordan understood better than most what this moment represented. It wasn't just about martial arts or standing up to bullies. It was about finding the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be, regardless of who was watching. Maya's demonstration built to its climax with a series of one-handed techniques that defied belief. A palm strike that could shatter boards, a defensive block that redirected incoming force with minimal effort, and finally, the move that had already become legend among the students of Westfield High. The one-handed karate chop that had ended Tyler Brooks' reign of terror with surgical precision, delivered not in anger but in absolute necessity. As she completed her final bow, the applause began slowly, uncertainly, then built like thunder rolling across the valley. People rose to their feet one by one, until the entire community center was standing. Maya opened her eyes and looked out at the faces before her, seeing not the audience that had gathered to watch a spectacle, but a community that was beginning to understand the difference between strength and violence, between justice and revenge. Principal Martinez returned to the microphone, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. The girl who had transferred to their school 6 months ago as a quiet, unremarkable sophomore had become something none of them could have predicted. But Maya Chen's story hadn't started with applause and recognition. It had started like so many stories of transformation do, with a family packing boxes and hoping for a fresh start in a place that promised to be different from what they were leaving behind. The standing ovation continued, but Maya's mind was already drifting back to that September morning when everything had begun. The day she had walked through the doors of Westfield High School for the first time, carrying secrets about who she used to be and dreams about who she might become. Back then, she couldn't have imagined this moment. Back then, she was just another new student hoping to disappear into the background and avoid attention. But life, as Maya had learned, rarely cooperates with plans for invisibility. Sometimes it takes your carefully constructed walls and tears them down with the sound of breaking bone and cruel laughter. Sometimes it forces you to choose between staying hidden and stepping into the light, even when that light feels impossibly bright and terrifyingly exposing. The moving truck had pulled away from Maple Street just after dawn, leaving behind tire tracks in the dew-soaked grass and the hollow echo of an empty house settling into silence. Maya Chen stood at her new bedroom window, watching the last traces of fog lift from the valley below. Pine Valley stretched out before her like a postcard, all clean suburban streets and carefully maintained lawns, so different from the crowded bustle of San Francisco's Chinatown, where she had spent the first 14 years of her life. Her reflection stared back from the glass, a girl caught between worlds. Black hair that refused to hold the elaborate styles her sister Rachel managed effortlessly, eyes that seemed too serious for 15, shoulders that had once been broader from years of training but had grown narrow from months of sitting hunched over textbooks. The calluses on her knuckles had finally faded, and sometimes she caught herself flexing her fingers, missing the familiar burn of Makiwara board practice. Lisa Chen called from downstairs, her voice carrying the forced brightness that had become familiar over the past 6 months. Maya's mother had perfected the art of enthusiastic optimism, as if sheer determination could transform their circumstances into something better than what they had left behind. The new job at Pine Valley Medical Center was everything Lisa had hoped for: better hours, better pay, and a chance for the family to start fresh in a community where past disappointments couldn't follow them. Maya pulled on the outfit she had chosen 3 times the night before: dark jeans and a plain gray sweater that would help her blend into any crowd. Invisibility had become her specialty since her grandfather's death 18 months ago. Master Chen had been the one who understood her love for the ancient forms, who had taught her that true strength came not from defeating others but from mastering herself. When the cancer took him, it had stolen more than just a beloved family member. It had taken her connection to a tradition that stretched back generations, leaving her adrift in a world that suddenly felt foreign and hostile. The drive to Westfield High School took 12 minutes through tree-lined streets where every house looked like it belonged in a magazine. Maya watched other teenagers walking toward the imposing brick building, noting how they moved in clusters, their body language speaking a social code she had never quite learned to read. In San Francisco, she had been part of a tight-knit community where everyone knew everyone else's family history going back 3 generations. Here, she was nobody's granddaughter, nobody's legacy student, just another transfer hoping to graduate without incident. Rachel chatted nervously from the passenger seat, her senior year confidence masking the anxiety they all felt about starting over. She had already made contact with the drama club through social media, establishing the foundation for what would likely become her usual effortless social success. Alex bounced in the back seat, his 12-year-old enthusiasm undimmed by the move. He saw adventure where Maya saw obstacles, opportunity where she saw potential humiliation. The parking lot of Westfield High buzzed with the particular energy of a Monday morning in early September. Students clustered around expensive cars, their conversations mixing complaints about weekend homework with speculation about who had hooked up at Saturday night's party. Maya observed them with the careful attention her grandfather had taught her to use when studying potential opponents. Not that she was looking for fights, but old habits of assessment died hard. Madison Pierce stood at the center of the largest group, her blonde hair catching the morning sunlight like a crown. She wore her status effortlessly, the kind of natural confidence that came from never having to question whether she belonged. Her laugh carried across the parking lot, bright and musical, drawing attention like a magnet draws metal. Even from a distance, Maya could see the way other students oriented themselves around Madison's presence. Satellites drawn into orbit around a star. The hallways of Westfield High stretched wide and bright, lined with trophy cases that spoke of decades of athletic and academic achievement. Maya clutched her schedule and locker combination, navigating the maze of corridors, while trying not to look as lost as she felt. The other students moved with the easy familiarity of people who had walked these halls for years, their conversations flowing around her like water around a stone. Her first period chemistry class provided temporary refuge in the universal anonymity of assigned seating and laboratory safety rules. Maya chose a lab station near the back, close enough to participate when necessary, but far enough from the front to avoid unwanted attention. The teacher, Mrs. Patterson, seemed competent and fair, the kind of educator who cared more about whether you understood molecular structures than whether you fit into the social hierarchy. It was during the transition between second and third periods that Maya first encountered the invisible boundaries that governed student life at Westfield High. She had been walking toward her English classroom when she realized she was following the same route as Madison Pierce and her inner circle. The hallway seemed to part naturally around them, creating a bubble of space that marked their territory as clearly as any physical barrier. Maya tried to step aside, to take a different path that wouldn't put her in their orbit, but the crowd of students made navigation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Impossible. She found herself walking directly behind the group, close enough to hear fragments of their conversation about weekend plans and upcoming auditions for the fall play. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to belong to such a circle, to move through the world with such certainty and ease. Chloe Williams glanced back first, her eyes taking in Maya's appearance with the quick assessment of someone accustomed to cataloging social threats. Maya felt the familiar tightening in her chest that came with unwanted scrutiny, the urge to shrink into herself until she became small enough to disappear entirely. But something in Chloe's expression caught her attention, a flicker of curiosity rather than dismissal. Madison turned when Chloe whispered something in her ear, her blue eyes settling on Maya with interest that felt both flattering and dangerous. For a heartbeat, Maya wondered if this might be the moment when her Pine Valley story took a different turn, when she found the acceptance that had eluded her in San Francisco during those final difficult months after her grandfather's death. Instead, Madison smiled the particular smile that Maya would later learn to recognize as a weapon disguised as welcome. It was the expression of someone who had perfected the art of making others feel special while simultaneously marking them for later consideration. Maya felt herself responding to that smile despite every instinct that warned her to be careful, to remember that popularity could be as dangerous as isolation. The bell rang before any words were exchanged, scattering students to their respective classrooms like leaves before a sudden wind. Maya hurried toward English literature, her heart beating faster than the brief encounter should have warranted. She told herself it was nervousness about being late, but part of her recognized the flutter of possibility, the dangerous hope that maybe this time things would be different. Mr. Rodriguez's English class proved to be a sanctuary of familiar comfort. Literature had always been one of Maya's strengths, a place where her natural introspection served her well. When the teacher asked for volunteers to read aloud from the opening chapter of their semester novel, Maya found herself raising her hand before she could reconsider the wisdom of calling attention to herself. Her voice carried clearly through the classroom as she read, steady and confident in a way that surprised even her. Several students looked up from their phones or notebooks, paying attention for the first time that period. Maya felt the familiar warmth that came from doing something well, from stepping into a space where her abilities mattered more than her social standing. When she finished reading, Mr. Rodriguez nodded approvingly and made a note in his gradebook. A few students offered polite smiles, and Maya allowed herself to think that maybe Westfield High might offer opportunities she hadn't expected. The morning had shown her glimpses of both danger and possibility, the dual nature of any new beginning. As the lunch bell approached, Maya steeled herself for the greatest challenge any new student faced, the cafeteria, where social hierarchies were displayed as clearly as the daily menu, and where a single wrong choice could define the next 4 years of her life. The cafeteria at Westfield High stretched before Maya like a battlefield mapped in lunch tables and invisible territorial lines. She stood frozen in the doorway, clutching her brown bag lunch while waves of students flowed around her toward the serving windows and scattered seating areas. The room buzzed with conversations that seemed to operate in a language she didn't speak, full of references to parties she hadn't attended and people she didn't know. Maya had navigated school cafeterias before, but Pine Valley's social ecosystem felt more complex than anything she had encountered in San Francisco. Tables seemed to have unspoken ownership, claimed by groups whose boundaries were as rigid as any formal assignment. The athletes dominated the center section near the windows, their Letterman jackets and easy laughter marking their territory. Academic overachievers clustered near the far wall, textbooks open beside their lunch trays, while theater kids animated conversations with dramatic gestures that carried across the room. She chose what appeared to be neutral territory, a half-empty table near the serving line where she could observe without seeming to stare. Maya unwrapped her sandwich methodically, trying to project an air of casual confidence she didn't feel. Her mother had packed her favorite combination of turkey and avocado, but the bread tasted like cardboard in her mouth as she watched the intricate dance of social interaction playing out around her. The first sign of trouble came when Madison Pierce entered the cafeteria with her usual entourage. Maya couldn't help but notice how conversations shifted when Madison walked by, voices dropping or rising depending on whether speakers wanted to be overheard. Chloe Williams flanked her left side while Brianna Torres took the right, creating a formation that seemed both protective and predatory. They moved with the synchronized precision Maya remembered from her old dojo, except their discipline served popularity rather than martial arts. Maya tried to focus on her lunch, but her peripheral vision tracked Madison's progress across the room. When the group settled at their usual table 3 rows away, she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Perhaps she could finish eating in peace and escape to the library for the remainder of lunch period. The plan seemed reasonable until she heard her name being called from across the room. Madison stood beside her table, close enough that Maya could smell her expensive perfume and see the perfect application of lip gloss that somehow survived morning classes without touch-ups. The queen bee of Westfield High was smiling, but Maya's grandfather had taught her to recognize the difference between genuine warmth and calculated charm. This smile belonged firmly in the second category. Maya looked up cautiously, aware that every conversation within a 10-table radius had suddenly quieted. She felt like a specimen under a microscope, interesting enough to examine but not necessarily worthy of respect. Madison's blue eyes swept over Maya's appearance with the thoroughness of a quality inspector checking for defects, taking inventory of everything from her discount store sweater to the way she held her shoulders slightly hunched forward. The invitation came wrapped in honey-sweet tones that somehow made Maya's skin crawl. Madison wondered if Maya might like to join them at their table, suggesting that new students shouldn't have to eat alone on their first day. The offer sounded generous to anyone listening, but Maya caught the subtle emphasis on certain words that transformed kindness into condescension. She was being positioned as an object of pity rather than potential friendship. Maya's instincts screamed warnings, but the loneliness of the past months made her vulnerable to even manufactured acceptance. She gathered her lunch with hands that trembled slightly, following Madison across the cafeteria while every eye in the room tracked their movement. The walk felt endless, like crossing a stage where she hadn't auditioned for the role she was about to play. The conversation at Madison's table flowed with practiced ease, touching on weekend plans and gossip about teachers Maya hadn't met yet. She listened carefully, trying to identify safe topics where she might contribute without revealing too much about herself. When asked about her previous school, Maya offered carefully neutral responses about San Francisco without mentioning the dojo or her grandfather's death, or the reasons her family had really decided to leave. The trap revealed itself gradually, like quicksand that seemed solid until you realized you were sinking. Chloe mentioned that Maya looked athletic, wondering aloud if she played any sports. Maya deflected with vague comments about staying in shape, but Brianna pressed for specifics. Had she ever done gymnastics, dance, tennis? The questions felt casual, but Maya sensed an agenda lurking beneath the surface. When pressed further, Maya admitted to some experience with martial arts, immediately regretting the admission when she saw the exchange of glances between her table companions. Madison's smile sharpened, taking on the quality of a blade hidden beneath silk. She expressed fascination with karate, confessing that she had always wanted to learn self-defense but had never found the time between her busy schedule of student government and drama club. The conversation shifted subtly, moving from questions about Maya's background to demonstrations of their own achievements. Chloe described her summer internship at a prestigious law firm, while Brianna detailed her family's vacation home in the mountains. Madison shared news about her acceptance into an elite college preparation program that would look impressive on university applications. Each story served to establish hierarchy, making clear that Maya's modest background couldn't compete with their advantages. Maya felt herself shrinking as the lunch period progressed, becoming smaller and quieter as the conversation flowed around her rather than including her. She began to understand that her presence at the table wasn't about friendship or even basic kindness. She was serving as an audience for their performance, a witness to their superiority, whose gratitude was expected but whose participation was optional. The final blow came when Madison asked Maya to demonstrate some of her karate moves right there in the cafeteria. The request was framed as enthusiasm, with Madison claiming she was dying to see what real martial arts looked like. But Maya recognized the setup even as she struggled to escape it gracefully. Refusing would mark her as unfriendly or pretentious, while complying would make her a performing monkey entertaining an audience that had no real respect for her abilities. Maya attempted to deflect, explaining that martial arts required proper space and equipment, that demonstrations belonged in dojos rather than lunchrooms. Her grandfather had taught her that true discipline meant knowing when not to fight, understanding that some battles were won by refusing to engage. But Madison pressed harder, suggesting that Maya was being modest or perhaps exaggerating her experience. The accusation stung because it contained just enough truth to be devastating. Maya hadn't trained seriously since her grandfather's death, hadn't stepped foot in a dojo since the family had left San Francisco. Her forms had grown rusty, her timing uncertain. The skills that had once defined her felt buried beneath months of grief and displacement, too fragile to expose to scrutiny from people who saw her art as entertainment rather than discipline. When Maya continued to resist, Madison's mask finally slipped. She wondered aloud if Maya was actually trained at all, suggesting that maybe she had watched too many movies and confused fantasy with reality. The words were delivered with a laugh that invited others to join in the joke, transforming Maya from guest to target in a single moment. Chloe and Brianna picked up the thread eagerly, adding their own observations about people who exaggerated their abilities to seem more interesting. The conversation became a dissection of Maya's character, carried out with surgical precision while she sat trapped at their table. Other students began to notice the shift in dynamics, conversations at nearby tables quieting as people sensed drama unfolding. Maya finally stood, her chair scraping loudly against the linoleum floor. She mumbled something about needing to go to the library, gathering her lunch bag with hands that shook from humiliation rather than fear. Madison's parting shot followed her across the cafeteria, a suggestion that Maya should consider joining the drama club, since she clearly had such an active imagination. The laughter that erupted from their table felt like acid on Maya's skin as she fled the cafeteria. She could hear whispers spreading through the room like wildfire, the story of her humiliation being passed from table to table before she had even reached the exit. By the time the lunch period ended, every student in Westfield High would know about the new girl who claimed to know karate but couldn't prove it when challenged. Maya found refuge in the empty library, hiding behind stacks of books while she tried to process what had just happened. She had survived her first major social encounter at Westfield High, but survival felt more like defeat than victory. The girls she had hoped might become friends had revealed themselves as predators, and she had become their latest prey. Maya's decision to approach Ethan Davis felt both inevitable and terrifying as she spotted him near his locker after third period. The star soccer player stood surrounded by the usual cluster of athletes and admirers, his easy smile drawing people into his orbit like planets around the sun. She had been thinking about him since their brief eye contact during English class, when he had looked up from his phone long enough to offer what seemed like genuine interest in her reading of the assigned passage. The hallway buzzed with the familiar energy of students transitioning between classes, conversations flowing around her as she gathered the courage to step outside her comfort zone. Maya had spent the morning rehearsing different ways to approach Ethan, settling on asking about the upcoming school fundraiser she had seen advertised on bulletin boards throughout the building. It seemed like a safe topic, neutral enough to avoid the social landmines that had exploded in her face during the cafeteria incident. As she drew closer to Ethan's group, Maya caught fragments of their conversation about weekend plans and upcoming games. His voice carried easily above the others, confident without being arrogant, inclusive in a way that made everyone around him feel valued. She could see why he commanded such respect among his peers, and for a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to be welcomed into such a circle. Ethan noticed her approach before his friends did, turning toward her with raised eyebrows that conveyed curiosity rather than annoyance. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she forced herself to maintain eye contact, remembering her grandfather's lessons about projecting confidence, even when uncertainty threatened to overwhelm her. The techniques he had taught her for centering herself before forms practice seemed applicable to social situations, breathing deep and finding balance before moving forward. Their conversation began promisingly enough, with Ethan expressing genuine interest in her thoughts about the fundraiser and asking thoughtful questions about her previous school's approach to similar events. Maya felt herself relaxing as they talked, discovering that beneath his popular exterior lay someone who actually listened when others spoke. His friends gradually drifted away to their respective classes, leaving them with a few minutes of relative privacy in the thinning hallway. Maya found herself sharing more than she had intended, describing some of the community service projects she had participated in at her San Francisco school, her enthusiasm for helping others warming her voice in a way that felt natural and unguarded. Ethan responded with stories of his own volunteer work, and for several precious minutes, Maya experienced the intoxicating sensation of connecting with someone who seemed to value her thoughts and perspectives. The moment shattered when Madison Pierce appeared beside them with the timing of someone who had been watching and waiting for the optimal moment to strike. Her smile was perfectly calibrated, bright enough to seem friendly to any casual observer but sharp enough to convey threat to those who knew how to read the subtle language of teenage social warfare. Maya felt her stomach clench as Madison positioned herself between them with movements that appeared casual but achieved the strategic goal of claiming Ethan's attention. Madison's interruption came wrapped in honey-sweet concern about either irrelevant or potentially fabricated. When pressed for details about her training, Maya found herself caught between honesty and self-protection. Admitting that she hadn't practiced seriously since her grandfather's death would confirm their assessment of her as someone who exaggerated her abilities, but claiming current proficiency would invite the kind of demonstration requests that had humiliated her before. She attempted to deflect with modest comments about being out of practice, but Madison pounced on the admission like a cat on a wounded bird. The suggestion that Maya demonstrate her skills came wrapped in such enthusiastic encouragement that refusing would have seemed churlish and suspicious. Madison proposed that they all meet in the gym after school, where Maya could show them some basic techniques in a proper setting with adequate space. Ethan expressed genuine interest in learning about martial arts, mentioning that he had always wanted to understand the discipline and philosophy behind different fighting styles. His eager support made Maya's reluctance seem unreasonable and antisocial. Maya tried to explain that martial arts required proper instruction and couldn't be safely demonstrated without appropriate supervision, but her objections were swept aside by Madison's assurances that they were all mature enough to be careful and responsible. The conversation took on momentum that carried Maya along despite her growing panic, with plans being made and times being set while she sat trapped by social pressure, and her own inability to articulate why the idea filled her with dread. The afternoon classes crawled by with agonizing slowness, as Maya contemplated the commitment she had been maneuvered into making. Her mind raced through possible excuses and exit strategies, but every option seemed to lead to greater humiliation and social isolation. Skipping the meeting would confirm Madison's implications about her fabricated abilities, while attending risked public failure that would destroy any chance of redemption. The choice felt like selecting between different methods of execution. By the time the final bell rang, Maya had worked herself into a state of barely controlled panic. Her hands trembled as she gathered her books, and her breathing felt shallow and rapid despite her attempts to center herself using the techniques her grandfather had taught her. The hallways filled with students heading home or to after-school activities, their casual conversations and laughter creating a soundtrack of normalcy that felt impossibly distant from her own experience. The gym stood empty except for the small group that had gathered near the wrestling mats, their voices echoing in the cavernous space as they waited for Maya's arrival. She paused outside the entrance, watching through the glass doors as Madison animated the conversation with gestures and expressions that suggested she was building anticipation for the entertainment about to begin. Ethan sat on the bleachers nearby, his phone put away, and his attention focused on the group in a way that indicated genuine interest rather than mere social obligation. Maya forced herself to enter the gym, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor as she approached the assembled group. Madison greeted her with exaggerated enthusiasm, expressing delight that Maya had decided to honor their request despite her obvious reluctance. The comment was phrased as appreciation, but carried undertones that highlighted Maya's hesitation as evidence of uncertainty about her own abilities. The mats had been arranged in a rough square, creating a performance space that felt both too large and too small for what was being asked of her. Maya looked around the makeshift arena and felt her grandfather's presence like a ghost at her shoulder, his voice reminding her that martial arts were about discipline and respect rather than entertainment and showing off. The wisdom felt both comforting and condemning, as she prepared to violate every principle he had taught her about the proper context for demonstrating technique. Madison's introduction positioned Maya as their resident expert on ancient fighting arts, someone who would graciously share her knowledge with friends who were eager to learn. The framing made refusal seem selfish and antisocial, while participation promised to expose her rust and uncertainty to an audience that was more interested in spectacle than education. Maya found herself nodding along with the introduction, despite the sick feeling growing in her stomach. When asked to begin with some basic forms, Maya attempted to center herself and recall the movements that had once been second nature. Her body remembered fragments of the sequences her grandfather had drilled into her through countless hours of practice, but the fluidity and confidence that had once characterized her performance were conspicuously absent. She moved through abbreviated versions of familiar patterns, acutely aware of how stiff and uncertain her techniques appeared compared to the graceful power she had once possessed. The small audience watched with polite attention that gradually shifted toward restlessness as Maya's demonstration failed to live up to whatever expectations Madison had cultivated. Her forms lacked the explosive power and precise timing that made martial arts impressive to untrained observers, instead appearing more like elaborate dance moves performed without conviction or authority. Maya could see disappointment and skepticism growing on their faces as her performance confirmed their suspicions about her exaggerated abilities. Madison's commentary during the demonstration served to highlight Maya's shortcomings while maintaining the pretense of supportive encouragement. She asked questions about the practical applications of various techniques, wondering aloud how effective such movements would be in actual confrontations. When Maya attempted to explain the philosophical foundations underlying the physical techniques, Madison expressed fascination, while subtly conveying that such abstract concepts were less interesting than concrete demonstrations of fighting ability. The request for a sparring demonstration came as Maya was attempting to conclude her presentation with explanations about the importance of controlled practice and proper supervision. Madison suggested that everyone would better understand the effectiveness of karate if they could see it applied in a realistic scenario, even a carefully controlled one. Ethan voiced support for the idea, mentioning his curiosity about how martial arts techniques worked against resistance from actual opponents. Maya's protests about safety and the need for protective equipment were dismissed as excessive caution, with Madison arguing that they could keep things light and controlled without risking injury. The peer pressure built steadily as the group expressed disappointment at the prospect of ending their learning experience without seeing practical applications. Maya found herself agreeing to a limited demonstration despite every instinct warning her that the situation was spinning beyond her control. Madison volunteered Chloe as a practice partner, reasoning that two girls of similar size would make for the safest possible matchup. The suggestion seemed reasonable on the surface, but Maya recognized the strategic thinking behind pairing her with someone who would be motivated to make her look bad, rather than simply providing resistance for technical demonstration. Chloe's eagerness to participate and her aggressive body language suggested that she saw the opportunity as a chance to humble Maya rather than learn about martial arts. The sparring session began with Maya attempting to demonstrate basic defensive techniques, showing how to deflect incoming attacks and maintain distance from aggressive opponents. But Chloe's approach proved more intense than the controlled practice Maya had expected, forcing her to respond to genuine aggression rather than cooperative learning exercises. The rust in Maya's timing and technique became glaringly apparent as she struggled to manage an opponent who wasn't interested in making her look good. Madison provided running commentary that highlighted every moment when Maya's defenses proved inadequate or her counters failed to control the engagement. Her observations were framed as educational analysis, but the cumulative effect was to document Maya's failure to live up to her supposed expertise. When Chloe managed to slip past Maya's guard and grab her arm, Madison expressed surprise that someone with martial arts training couldn't prevent such a basic attack. The situation escalated when Chloe refused to release her grip despite Maya's repeated requests to reset their positions. What had begun as controlled practice devolved into an actual struggle as Chloe used her wrestling experience to take Maya down to the mat. Maya's attempts to apply technical escapes failed against Chloe's superior leverage and determination to maintain dominance, exposing the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application that months of inactivity had created. Maya's frustration and embarrassment began to transform into something more dangerous as the humiliation continued. She could hear Madison's delighted commentary about the effectiveness of good old-fashioned wrestling compared to fancy foreign fighting styles, each word stoking the anger that Maya had been suppressing since her first day at Westfield High. Her grandfather's teachings about controlling emotions during conflict felt distant and irrelevant as her temper began to slip its carefully maintained bounds. The breaking point came when Chloe cranked Maya's arm behind her back while Madison made jokes about submission techniques that didn't require years of exotic training to master. The pain was manageable, but the public humiliation and mocking laughter triggered something primal in Maya's response. Instead of tapping out or asking for mercy, she began to struggle more violently, her movements becoming desperate and uncontrolled as months of suppressed rage found an outlet. Maya's attempt to break free, using a technique she half remembered from her grandfather's lessons, proved catastrophic when combined with Chloe's determination to maintain control. The movement that should have created space for escape instead created leverage that amplified the pressure on Maya's trapped arm. The sound of bone snapping echoed through the gym like a gunshot, followed immediately by Maya's scream of pain and shock. The immediate aftermath felt surreal, with everyone frozen in horror as Maya clutched her obviously broken arm while tears of pain and humiliation streamed down her face. Chloe released her grip immediately, backing away with wide eyes and stammered apologies that couldn't undo what had just happened. Madison's commentary fell silent for the first time all afternoon, replaced by an expression of genuine shock that suggested even she hadn't intended for things to go this far. Ethan was the first to recover from the shock, immediately pulling out his phone to call for medical assistance while kneeling beside Maya to offer what comfort he could. His genuine concern and gentle voice provided the only bright spot in a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. Maya found herself focusing on his presence as a lifeline, while waves of pain radiated from her shattered arm, and the full implications of what had happened began to sink in. The paramedics arrived with impressive speed, their professional competence a welcome contrast to the chaos and confusion that had preceded their arrival. Maya's arm was immobilized, and she was loaded onto a stretcher while the EMTs gathered information about what had happened. Their matter-of-fact approach to her injury helped Maya begin to process the trauma, though the shock still made everything feel disconnected and unreal. The ride to Pine Valley Medical Center provided Maya with her first moments of peace since entering the gym that afternoon. The paramedic monitoring her vital signs offered calm reassurance about her prognosis, explaining that arm fractures were serious but highly treatable injuries that healed well with proper care. His professional confidence helped counter the catastrophic thinking that had begun to dominate Maya's mental state. Lisa Chen's reaction upon seeing her daughter in the emergency room mixed relief that the injury wasn't life-threatening with maternal fury at the circumstances that had caused it. Maya watched her mother's face cycle through emotions as the story emerged, seeing the exact moment when Lisa realized that her daughter's injury had resulted from the kind of social dynamics she had encouraged Maya to embrace. The guilt and self-recrimination in her mother's eyes felt almost as painful as the broken bone. The orthopedic surgeon who treated Maya's fracture was thorough in explaining both the immediate treatment and long-term recovery process. The break was clean but displaced, requiring surgical insertion of a plate and screws to ensure proper healing. Maya listened to the medical details with growing understanding that her injury would affect far more than just her physical capabilities, fundamentally altering her daily life for months to come. The surgery went smoothly, but Maya's recovery began in a haze of pain medication and disorientation that made processing her new reality difficult. Her dominant arm was immobilized in a cast that would remain in place for at least 8 weeks, forcing her to relearn basic tasks using her non-dominant hand. Simple activities like writing, eating, and dressing became frustrating challenges that highlighted her dependence on others for assistance. The school's response to the incident proved as disappointing as Maya had expected, with administrators more concerned about liability and public relations than addressing the underlying social dynamics that had created the dangerous situation. Principal Martinez visited Maya in the hospital with expressions of concern that felt hollow and obligatory, offering vague assurances about investigating what had happened without any apparent commitment to meaningful change. Madison Pierce's attempt at an apology came through a carefully worded card that managed to express regret without accepting responsibility, suggesting that the incident had been an unfortunate accident that no one could have predicted. The message's calculated tone and legal-sounding language suggested adult involvement in its composition, reinforcing Maya's growing understanding that accountability would be limited to whatever minimum the situation required. Maya's return to school after a week of medical leave felt like entering a war zone where the battle had already been fought, and the terms of surrender had been dictated by the victors. The story of her injury had spread through the student body in various forms, most of which positioned her as either a fraud who had been exposed or a victim whose misfortune generated sympathy without respect. Neither narrative offered the foundation for genuine social recovery. The physical challenges of navigating school with a broken arm proved manageable compared to the social aftermath that followed her everywhere. Students who had previously ignored her now stared with mixtures of curiosity and pity that made her feel like a medical exhibit rather than a person. The attention was unwelcome but preferable to the snickering comments she caught from Madison's circle whenever they passed in the hallways. Maya's academic performance suffered as she struggled to take notes and complete assignments with her non-dominant hand, the physical limitations compounding the emotional trauma that made concentration difficult. Teachers offered extensions and accommodations that helped practically but reinforced her sense of being damaged goods rather than a capable student temporarily facing challenges. The special treatment felt both necessary and stigmatizing. The isolation that had begun with her first day at Westfield High deepened as Maya's injury created additional barriers to social connection. Other students seemed uncertain about how to interact with someone whose visible disability served as a constant reminder of the violence that lurked beneath their school's polished surface. Maya found herself eating lunch alone more often than not, her broken arm serving as both explanation and excuse for her solitude. Rachel's attempts to provide sisterly support felt well-meaning but ultimately missed the mark, as her natural social confidence prevented her from truly understanding the depth of Maya's alienation. Her suggestions about finding new friend groups and focusing on activities that didn't require physical participation came from a place of caring, but demonstrated how little she grasped about the systematic nature of Maya's exclusion. The advice felt like being told to swim while wearing concrete shoes. Alex proved surprisingly insightful in his observations about Maya's situation, his middle school perspective offering clarity that the adults in her life seemed to lack. He recognized that her injury represented more than just a broken bone, understanding intuitively that his sister had been damaged in ways that wouldn't heal when the cast came off. His simple presence and uncomplicated affection provided comfort without the burden of expectations or advice. The turning point in Maya's recovery came during a late-night conversation with her mother about the family's future in Pine Valley. Lisa had been struggling with guilt about encouraging Maya to pursue friendships that had resulted in injury, questioning whether their move had been a mistake and whether they should consider relocating again. Maya surprised herself by arguing against another move, explaining that running away wouldn't solve the fundamental problems she faced. Maya's decision to stay and fight back began with small acts of defiance that built her confidence while remaining below the radar of school administrators and potential tormentors. She started eating lunch in the library rather than the cafeteria, transforming her isolation from imposed punishment into chosen sanctuary. The quiet space among books felt more welcoming than any table full of students who viewed her as entertainment or charity case. Her research into martial arts philosophy and technique began as a way to reconnect with her grandfather's memory, but evolved into serious preparation for reclaiming the skills that had once defined her identity. Maya devoured books about adaptation and training modifications for injured practitioners, discovering that many great martial artists had overcome physical limitations to achieve mastery. The historical examples provided inspiration and practical guidance for her own recovery journey. The first tentative attempts at practicing forms with her uninjured arm felt clumsy and frustrating, but Maya persisted through the awkwardness with determination that surprised her. Her grandfather's teachings about patience and gradual progress took on new meaning as she worked to rebuild her abilities within the constraints imposed by her injury. Each small improvement felt like a victory against the forces that had tried to break her spirit along with her arm. Maya's exploration of one-handed techniques led her to discover specialized forms developed by practitioners who had lost limbs in wars or accidents, their innovations expanding the traditional boundaries of what martial arts could accommodate. The research revealed a rich history of adaptation and resilience that resonated with her own experience of having to rebuild her identity around permanent change. The knowledge that others had faced similar challenges and triumphed provided hope for her own recovery. The decision to approach the school about starting a self-defense club came after weeks of careful planning and research into liability issues and educational justifications. Maya crafted her proposal to emphasize personal safety and confidence building rather than martial arts training, knowing that administrators would be more receptive to programs that addressed contemporary concerns about student welfare. Her broken arm actually became an asset in selling the program, demonstrating the real-world need for self-protection skills. Jordan Kim emerged as Maya's first ally in the club formation process, having witnessed the cafeteria humiliation and gym incident with growing recognition that Westfield High's social dynamics were toxic for anyone who didn't fit predetermined molds. As a quiet artist who had faced their own share of bullying, Jordan understood the value of having structured alternatives to the traditional social hierarchies that govern student life. Their support provided crucial validation from Maya's vision. Sam Rodriguez joined their planning sessions after overhearing conversations about the proposed club, bringing fresh perspective as a freshman who was still navigating the social landscape but already recognized the need for alternatives to sink-or-swim social integration. His enthusiasm and optimism balanced Maya and Jordan's more cautious approaches, helping them envision the club as something that could attract students beyond those who had already been marginalized. The club's approval process moved more smoothly than Maya had expected, with Principal Martinez apparently viewing the program as positive public relations following the negative attention generated by Maya's injury. His support came with restrictions and oversight requirements that made the club feel more like supervised therapy than empowerment training. But Maya accepted the limitations as necessary compromises for achieving her larger goals. Aisha Patel's decision to join the club brought credibility and experience that Maya's group desperately needed, as her reputation as someone who had successfully transformed from victim to confident leader provided proof that change was possible. Her willingness to share strategies for building mental resilience and practical self-protection skills helped establish the club's legitimacy, while offering Maya a mentor who understood her journey from personal experience. The club's early meetings focused more on confidence building and situational awareness than physical techniques, recognizing that most members needed psychological preparation before they could benefit from tactical training. Maya discovered that teaching others helped solidify her own recovery, forcing her to articulate lessons about inner strength that she was still learning to apply in her own life. The role of instructor, even informally, began to restore her sense of competence and purpose. Maya's relationship with Ethan Davis evolved gradually through their shared involvement in the club's development, as his genuine interest in supporting the program demonstrated character that went beyond his popular persona. His presence helped legitimize the club among students who might otherwise have dismissed it as a gathering for social outcasts, while his respectful approach to learning from Maya restored some of her faith in the possibility of authentic connection across social boundaries. The club's growing membership created a supportive community that offered Maya the belonging she had been seeking since arriving in Pine Valley, but on terms that honored her authentic self rather than requiring her to conform to others' expectations. The diverse group of students who gathered weekly represented various forms of marginalization and resilience, their shared commitment to personal growth creating bonds that transcended traditional social categories. Maya's one-handed techniques improved steadily through dedicated practice and adaptation of traditional forms to accommodate her limitations. What had initially felt like compensation for disability gradually evolved into specialized skills that offered unique advantages in certain situations. Her grandfather's teachings about turning weakness into strength took on practical meaning as she developed fighting techniques that no opponent would expect or know how to counter. The opportunity to demonstrate her abilities publicly came when the club was invited to participate in Pine Valley's annual Community Safety Fair, an event that brought together various organizations focused on emergency preparedness and personal protection. Maya saw the invitation as a chance to showcase what she and her fellow club members had accomplished while educating the broader community about the importance of self-defense training. The weeks leading up to the demonstration were filled with intensive preparation as Maya worked to perfect a routine that would showcase both technical skill and the philosophical principles underlying martial arts practice. Her broken arm, still healing but no longer limiting her range of motion significantly, became an integral part of her presentation rather than something to work around or hide. The visible reminder of her journey from victim to empowered individual would give her demonstration meaning beyond mere physical technique. Madison Pierce's reaction to news of Maya's upcoming public demonstration revealed itself through increased hostility and attempts to undermine the club's reputation among other students. Her campaign of subtle sabotage included spreading rumors about the club's true purpose and questioning Maya's qualifications to teach self-defense given her history of being injured during practice. The opposition felt familiar but no longer had the power to devastate Maya's confidence as it once had. The morning of the Community Safety Fair dawned clear and bright, with perfect weather for the outdoor event that would bring together hundreds of Pine Valley residents. Maya arrived early to help set up the club's demonstration area, her nervous energy channeled into careful preparation of equipment and practice space. The supportive presence of her fellow club members helped calm her anxiety while building excitement for the opportunity to share their work with a broader audience. Maya Chen brought the entire family to watch Maya's demonstration, her pride and nervousness evident as she claimed seats in the front row of the assembled audience. Rachel and Alex flanked their mother with enthusiasm that felt genuine rather than obligatory, their support providing Maya with emotional anchor points when the scope of the audience threatened to overwhelm her focus. The sight of her family's confident expectation helped steady her nerves. The crowd that gathered for the self-defense demonstrations included many familiar faces from school and the broader Pine Valley community, creating an audience that represented both support and judgment for Maya's public return to martial arts. She spotted several teachers, parents from her neighborhood, and students whose reactions would influence her social standing at Westfield High. The stakes felt appropriately high for what she intended to be a defining moment in her recovery. Principal Martinez introduced Maya with comments that emphasized her resilience and determination while carefully avoiding direct reference to the circumstances of her injury. His diplomatic approach to acknowledging her journey reflected the school's ongoing sensitivity about liability issues, but his genuine admiration for her comeback was evident in his tone and body language. The introduction positioned Maya as an inspiration rather than a cautionary tale. Maya stepped into the demonstration area with the calm confidence that came from months of preparation and spiritual reconnection with her grandfather's teachings. Her movements as she bowed to the audience and began her warm-up exercises reflected the centered balance that had once characterized her practice, but had been lost during the difficult months following Master Chen's death. The familiar rituals helped her access the mindset necessary for peak performance. The demonstration began with basic stances and movements that showcased the fundamental principles underlying all martial arts techniques. Maya's explanations helping the audience understand that effective self-defense required mental preparation and strategic thinking rather than just physical strength. Her teaching approach honored her grandfather's emphasis on philosophy and discipline, while making the concepts accessible to people with no martial arts background. Maya's transition to one-handed techniques drew audible gasps from the audience as she demonstrated the power and precision possible even with significant physical limitations. Her adaptation of traditional forms to accommodate her injury had resulted in innovations that were both practically effective and visually impressive, proving that obstacles could become sources of strength when approached with creativity and determination. The techniques felt like artistic expression as much as combat application. The climax of her demonstration came when Maya invited a volunteer from the audience to help illustrate defensive applications of her techniques, carefully selecting someone whose size and strength would make her success seem more impressive without creating actual danger. Her ability to redirect aggression and control a larger opponent using leverage and timing rather than force provided a powerful lesson about the nature of true martial arts mastery. Maya's final technique, a one-handed strike that split a wooden board held by Jordan Kim, served as both technical demonstration and symbolic statement about her journey from victim to empowered individual. The crack of breaking wood echoed across the demonstration area with finality that felt like punctuation mark on her story of recovery and growth. The audience erupted in applause that felt qualitatively different from polite appreciation, expressing genuine admiration and respect. The standing ovation that followed Maya's demonstration lasted longer than she had ever experienced, with people rising spontaneously to acknowledge not just her technical skill, but the courage and determination her performance represented. She found herself scanning the crowd for faces of those who had doubted or dismissed her, seeing expressions of surprise and grudging respect that validated her months of painful recovery and preparation. Madison Pierce's presence in the audience added particular satisfaction to Maya's triumph, as the girl who had orchestrated her humiliation now watched helplessly as Maya claimed a level of respect and admiration that social manipulation could never achieve. The power dynamic between them had shifted permanently, with Maya's demonstrated competence providing unassailable protection against future attempts at undermining her confidence or reputation. Ethan Davis approached Maya after her demonstration with congratulations that felt genuine and personal, his admiration evident as he expressed amazement at her skill and determination. Their conversation revealed depth and character that his popular persona had previously hidden, suggesting possibilities for authentic friendship that transcended the social categories that had once seemed insurmountable. His respect felt earned rather than granted as charity or pity. The response from other students at Westfield High in the days following Maya's demonstration created a complete transformation in her social standing, with former tormentors now offering cautious respect while previously indifferent classmates sought opportunities to connect with someone who had proven herself extraordinary. The change felt overwhelming at times, but Maya had learned to distinguish between genuine interest and opportunistic association. Maya's self-defense club experienced explosive growth as news of her demonstration spread throughout the school and broader community, with new members joining weekly meetings that had evolved from small support groups into substantial training sessions. The success created new challenges as Maya worked to maintain the club's founding principles, while accommodating diverse interests and skill levels among participants, who brought varying motivations for involvement. The club's expansion led to opportunities for advanced training and competition that Maya had never imagined possible during her darkest moments following the injury. Invitations to participate in regional martial arts events and collaborate with other schools' programs validated the legitimacy of their work while providing goals that motivated continued growth and improvement. Maya found herself becoming a recognized leader in her community's martial arts scene. Rachel's evolving relationship with Maya reflected their family's adjustment to seeing her as someone capable of exceptional achievement rather than someone in need of protection and guidance. The sister dynamics that had once positioned Rachel as the successful one and Maya as the struggling one shifted to accommodate recognition that both daughters had unique strengths and potential for remarkable accomplishment. The change felt healthy and overdue. Alex's pride in his sister's achievements became a source of playground social capital that he wielded with the unconscious confidence of someone whose family produced genuine heroes. His stories about Maya's martial arts skills and teaching abilities elevated his own standing among peers, while strengthening the sibling bond that had always been characterized by mutual affection and support. The family's collective identity evolved to include Maya's transformation. Lisa Chen's perspective on her daughter's journey encompassed guilt about initial misjudgments, amazement at Maya's resilience, and growing understanding that protection sometimes required stepping back to allow independent growth. Her relationship with Maya matured as she learned to balance maternal concern with respect for her daughter's proven capability to handle challenges and threats. The evolution felt like natural progression rather than forced change. Maya's reputation at Westfield High continued evolving long after her demonstration, with her story becoming part of the school's mythology in ways that inspired other students facing their own challenges. Teachers began referring to her example when counseling students about resilience and self-advocacy, while administrators pointed to the Self-Defense Club as evidence of their school's commitment to student empowerment and safety. The recognition felt both gratifying and surreal. The ongoing development of Maya's martial arts abilities proceeded with renewed focus and purpose, as she worked to master advanced techniques while maintaining the philosophical foundation that her grandfather had emphasized throughout her early training. Her practice sessions became meditation in motion, connecting her to generations of practitioners who had found strength and wisdom through dedicated pursuit of physical and mental discipline. Maya's relationship with her own story evolved as she gained perspective on the events that had shaped her journey from victim to survivor to empowered individual. The broken arm that had once represented devastating defeat now served as visible reminder of her capacity to overcome obstacles and transform challenges into sources of strength. The scar tissue became badge of honor rather than mark of shame. The community safety fair demonstration became annual tradition for Maya and her club, with each year's performance building on previous successes while introducing new techniques and participants. The event served as public celebration of personal growth and community support, reinforcing connections between individual achievement and collective responsibility for creating safe, empowering environments for everyone. Madison Pierce's gradual fade from prominence at Westfield High coincided with growing recognition that social manipulation and exclusionary tactics had become less effective as students developed greater awareness of their impact and alternatives. Maya's example contributed to cultural shift that valued authentic achievement over inherited status, creating space for diverse forms of success and belonging. The change felt like natural evolution rather than revolution. Tyler Brooks's absence from school following more serious consequences for his role in various incidents, including Maya's injury, served as a reminder that actions carried real consequences beyond temporary embarrassment or social disapproval. His departure created opportunity for healing and growth among students who had lived under threat of his aggressive behavior. The community felt safer and more open to positive change. Maya's influence extended beyond martial arts and self-defense to encompass broader advocacy for student empowerment and anti-bullying initiatives that address systematic issues rather than just individual incidents. Her voice in school policy discussions carried weight because of her demonstrated expertise and lived experience with both victimization and recovery. The platform felt like a natural extension of her grandfather's teachings about responsibility to help others. The scholarship opportunities that emerged from Maya's competitive martial arts achievements provided pathways to educational goals that had seemed financially impossible before her transformation. Universities and martial arts organizations recognized her combination of technical skill, teaching ability, and inspirational story as valuable assets that warranted investment and support. The opportunities felt like validation of her family's sacrifices and struggles. Maya's teaching responsibilities expanded as demand for her instruction grew among both youth and adult populations, seeking practical self-defense skills and philosophical guidance about personal empowerment. Her unique perspective as someone who had experienced both victimization and mastery resonated with students facing their own challenges with confidence and safety. The work felt like fulfillment of destiny rather than career choice. The legacy of Maya's journey from broken arm to broken boards became inspiration for countless individuals who heard her story through various media coverage and speaking engagements that highlighted themes of resilience, adaptation, and empowerment. Her example demonstrated that temporary defeats could become foundations for extraordinary achievements when approached with determination and proper support. The message transcended martial arts to encompass universal human potential. Maya's final reflection on her transformation acknowledged the pain and struggle that had been necessary parts of her growth, while celebrating the strength and wisdom that emerged from her willingness to persevere through difficulty. Her broken arm had healed stronger than before, and her spirit had undergone similar reconstruction that left her more capable and confident than she could have imagined during her darkest moments. The journey felt complete, but ongoing. The standing ovation that had marked Maya's public demonstration continued echoing in her memory as a reminder of what became possible when authentic ability met genuine courage in service of something larger than individual success. Her story joined the countless others of individuals who had refused to accept defeat as final verdict, instead choosing to write new chapters that honored both their struggles and their triumphs. The applause represented recognition not just of technique, but of human potential realized through dedication and determination. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.